So thank you very much for joining me once again. So today we are with Otumba Akimbo Akinolubade, CEO of Skyway Technologies Limited. So Skyway Technology is one of the largest supply chain management company in West Africa. Yes, in West Africa, and they've been rated 8 out of the out of a lot of companies in Africa as one of the fastest growing companies by Financial Times. Thank you very much for joining me today, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. For people that don't know about what supply chain and logistics is, because it's a lot of grammars for a lot of Nigerians. Can you take us through when you say supply chain and logistics, what do you actually do?
So the way we look at ourselves really is as project managers. Supply chain itself is everything through the value chain, right from choosing suppliers for our clients, choosing the suppliers to the production, the manufacturing time, the payments for those orders. Then after the production is done, scheduling the shipping, whether that's by sea, by air, or by land, the export process, the import process, and then finally the last bit, the logistics part, the delivery to the end client, either at their companies or at specific sites that they might require the materials at.
Wow, that's a lot of work. In fact, you guys are actually making the work easier for entrepreneurs, because everything you just mentioned now is the stress. These are things that stress entrepreneurs all over the world. So how do you
that's exactly it. We're putting ourselves in there so that entire process is taken off our client's plates.
Wow, that's interesting. So how do you actually get started? How do you actually start this business? What's your story?
So our story is not a typical story. About 10 years ago, I had a friend of a friend, and they had clients that had problems, and it was a large infrastructure company in Nigeria. And that friend was, look, you need to talk to this guy because, he just likes solving problems. So I was called, and then I got on a plane, took a flight to Abuja, and went with that friend and my business partner. And we sat down with this infrastructure company, and, they took the meeting as a courtesy meeting because, they just had to take the meeting. And they told us their problems, and, we're writing down, and they just thought, it's just another set of Nigerian guys, and we left. We go back to Lagos, and I immediately put a call through to the suppliers, which were in South Africa at the time. And I was like, look, can I get pricing? And I sent them a list of items, and if I remember correctly, it was about 60,000 euro worth of items. And a day or two later, they sent back a reply with a quotation and the delivery times and the terms and everything. And I wired them the money, which at the time was my life savings. My business partner, he went crazy and was like, no, you just transferred, so much money to a company you don't know. And I was like, why are you doing it? And for me, it was a very simple calculation. The company that we were purchasing from in South Africa is a subsidiary of one of the largest companies in the world. And the client in Nigeria is the largest infrastructure client company in Nigeria. So for me, the risk was very little. It was like, the money I've transferred, it's highly unlikely it's going to get lost. It's going to a huge multinational. And the person it's for, or the company it's for in Nigeria, is also a huge multinational. So to cut a long story short, 3 or 4 weeks later, the cargo arrived. And because of my background, I'm very familiar with the ports and customs and the clearing process. So that was a walk in the park. And we delivered the material to Abuja. A couple of days later, when the truck got to Abuja, my phone started ringing. And it was like, we've just received, material that we've been waiting for like a year. It's here. Like, yes, you said that you had a problem. I said, but we didn't even give you an LPO. And I said, no, you said you had a problem. We solved the problem. And our phone has been ringing ever since then. That's how we started.
Wow. That's fantastic. So from your background, I actually saw that you read engineering. How do you actually get to learn about supply chain and other stuff like that?
Well, what I studied in school is computer systems engineering. And while, yes, if you think about it, there's a lot of computing and computer architecture, and there's some programming and all of that in there, it was actually about processes. So my degree was actually about systems and processes. How do you make certain processes to optimize your operations? So it could be for computing, it could be for software, but it can also be for manufacturing, it can be for industry. It's all about processes. Once you have the processes right, then work will flow smoothly. So I think a lot of that knowledge ended up being applied to Skyway. Now, before Skyway and the places I worked, I always ended up doing the same thing. optimizing processes. And from that, one starts to get a lot of experience and you start to get a hang of certain elements. I was working first with a large fertilizer company, which at the time was the fourth largest fertilizer company in Nigeria, as a director of operations. And that exposed me a lot to the buying process. It was typically fertilizer, but we then set up a bagging unit, which I managed in its entirety. And again, that's what exposed me mostly to the customs process in Nigeria, because my office was at the port. So, everything from the customs long room to how they go about inspections and all of that. So that became very familiar to me over time. So when it came time to start Skyway, it was a no-brainer, really.
Wow, that's interesting. I read that Skyway actually started in 2007. That was about the time of the global recession. So what were the early days of the business like, starting a business, especially starting a business during a recession? What were the early days like?
Well, so in the early days, it was software. We did a lot of software development because I have a background in the UK. I used to manage teams of developers in Poland and India. And so when I moved to Nigeria, I was still doing that as a side business. So Skyway started as a side business, and it was being done under that banner. 2012 was when we really started in its current business in its current form.
Wow, I can imagine you've worked on a lot of interesting projects, especially based on the fact that you try to develop processes for businesses. Can you share with us any success story you've had with Skyway Technologies in particular?
I think a big one was back in, I think it was 2009 or 2010. There was a Turkish company that moved to Nigeria and set up in Nigeria, just outside of Ibadan. We helped them set up all the equipment. We provided all the equipment for building the plant. It was a stone crushing and asphalt production plant. So we provided all that equipment, and then they ran it for a year with a Turkish staff. And then after that year, they found out that the costs were rising dramatically, and they came to us and like, look, you helped us build the plant, can you help us run the plant? So we very quickly had to put together systems in place for that, and then provide personnel, and then provide ways of managing that from a distance, because we're based in Lagos. So we were going out there, I think, every 2 or 3 weeks, and within a couple of months we had that up and running, and we successfully ran the plant for them.
Wow. So I actually have interest in building system and processes. Is actually my biggest interest personally. So that's an interesting one. So what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you in this business? Because developing systems, managing logistics, like I said earlier, these are the things that bother entrepreneurs. So what is the worst thing that has ever happened to you in this business?
So I think there are a few bad ones, but the worst, has to be, it's government driven, is the exchange rates. I think those are the worst things we have to deal with. You can plan only so much for how the market is going to move. So of course, when we do our pricing and our planning, we try and create a buffer. And the buffer is not just in the exchange rate value, but we try and create buffers. Some buffers are efficiency buffers. So if something's supposed to take 2 weeks, we try and put in a buffer there to allow for margins of error or unforeseen circumstances, which you can't always predict. And of course, if you're able to deliver within or before that timeline, it makes you look a lot better because you've delivered early. But we try and build in buffers, but the exchange rate, especially last year where it went up, 20% or so within the space of 3 weeks, you can't really plan or foresee that. In other countries, you can hedge, but in Nigeria, it doesn't work. Even if you try and do something called an NDF contract, which is a forward contract for foreign exchange, at the time of delivery of that foreign exchange, the banks will just tell you they don't have it. Even though you paid the premium for the NDF, they just will tell you they don't have it. And the best case scenario is you will get the Naira difference for it, but you still don't have the foreign exchange, which is what you need at that time.
Wow, interesting. So how big does a company have to be before they can actually work with you guys at Skyway Technologies? And what was the process like working with you?
So we're lucky in that for us, a lot of things are the other way around, in that we tend to choose our clients almost. We work with quite a number of clients, but the nature of our work means we're always constrained in terms of time and personnel resources. So we tend to prefer clients that, also have processes in place to make work run smoothly. We've had situations with some of our existing clients where there are processes in place and they have new sets of staff, and then we end up teaching their staff things that we learned from them originally. So there's a nice symbiotic of life sort of situation with some of our clients that we've had for a long time. But generally, send a request to us, let us know what it is, and we'll look at it. And if it's something we can do, which usually we can, we send back a proposal, and then we take it from there.
Okay, for an aspiring entrepreneur, an aspiring young entrepreneur that wants to also learn about building systems, building processes, where can they start?
Honestly, you start by learning as much as you can about everything. Specialization is always good. We are now specialists in this area, but it starts with generalization. Learn as much as you can about everything. I mean, our team, they know, like, I'm always leaving books and sending links and articles and things which might seem at the time to be not directly related to what we do, but ultimately there's no knowledge that's lost. If you make a habit of reading and keeping up to date with what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the sector you're interested in, you will learn about it over time. And where you have the opportunity, then you expose yourself to that sector. It might be in a small way at the beginning, but over time, knowledge tends to compound. And that has been so useful to us in so many ways. I mean, I did a lot of work in fertilizer from my previous role 10 years ago, as I briefly mentioned. And I've kept up to date with the industry. And, recently we were asked to do a small research project for a company, which is not necessarily within our normal scope of work, but we had to do some research for a company that was going into that. And because they know that knowledge base is here, is why we were asked to do that. So it's knowledge. Keep abreast of what's going on all the time, especially in the industries that you're interested in.
Wow. So apart from the exchange rates, what are other challenges you currently face? I know there are a lot of challenges. What are some of the challenges you face?
Since COVID, some challenges are with the shipping side of things. Shipping rates went crazy. Even in Europe, I mean, shipping rates went, doubled from like 2,000, 3,000 euro to, 7,000 euro for per container for a shipment to Nigeria. So these are things that it's very hard to pass those costs along to your clients. So you have to then look at, okay, do we reduce our profit margin in the short term? How do we rebalance costs? Because you have pressure coming on you from all sides. You have the exchange rate pressure, you have the freight price pressure. Then we had production pressure. A lot of our manufacturers in Europe, that they don't have material. The war in Ukraine, but what's little known is plywood. Plywood, for instance, is made from birch. Birch is the middle layer of plywood. And most of the birch comes from the Ukraine. So right now, globally, there's a plywood shortage because the basic raw material is just not available. These are challenges that we have to deal with and navigate our way around. We're lucky in that because we typically deal on the buy side with large multinationals as well, they have factories in different countries. So we find ourselves mopping up supplies. Like if Germany's closed, we'll buy from Belgium. If Belgium is closed, we'll buy from Turkey. If Turkey's closed, we'll buy from France. So there's a lot of that going on behind the scenes. And that really helped us during COVID as well, where most companies were down and not processing orders. We were open for business. We were processing orders and we were ordering from everywhere that was open whenever it was open. So by the time lockdowns ended, we had, lots of material available for our clients and our competitors were just starting.
Wow. I believe that comes from your industry experience, the weight of value and the years of experience you've had. I think that's actually helped in that aspect.
I think at the time it was just a good call. It was not necessarily that we knew what was going to happen. It just happened to lie within our skill set. And, ducks lined up in a row for us at the time.
Oh, wow. So I actually read something that you actually deeply involved in the startup space in Nigeria. I can see that you are involved with Chaka and other companies. Can you talk to us more about that?
Yeah, so I'm involved with quite a number of startups, both from the investment side. I'm just trying to open a list so I can have a look. Yeah, we've done a lot of, I'd call it angel investing, which is ticket sizes which are $50,000 or less. There are quite a number of companies we've invested with, not just in Nigeria, as far away as Kenya, some in the US, some in the UK, but predominantly in Nigeria, yes. And, it's about finding the value proposition. Are these companies that are, in my opinion, are going to grow? That it depends on what your goals are. So sometimes I'm looking for scalability. I'm looking for companies that will scale in a large way. And other times I'm looking for companies that look, these are consistent dividend plays. They're not necessarily going to scale and be 1,000 times their size, but they're going to be consistent with their growth and consistent with their returns. It depends on what an investor is looking. Are you looking for scale or are you looking for consistency?
Wow. So how do you actually stay motivated as an entrepreneur? Where do you go to get inspiration from?
So for me, it's fairly easier for me because every day is different. One day we're doing glass for, NMPC or Providence Bank or some other company. And another day, honestly, it's teacups. So every day is different. That it's hard to get bored or demotivated if there's a new challenge every day. So I think that helps a lot, that our work differs and we always have to find new ways of achieving our objectives.
Wow, interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we've come to the end of the Zoom call. So is there anything I should have asked that I did not ask before we actually round up?
No, I think you've covered everything. I mean, my only message to entrepreneurs starting out is it's really about consistency. Everyone will most likely start out as a generalist, and that's how I started out as well. But then you find there's an area that you have something, you have a knack at something, you're able to do this better than other things. And then you start doubling down. You start doubling down on the knowledge in that area that you find that you're good at. And then you get better and better at it. And then you ultimately become a specialist at that thing. And then you start to amass other specialists in that area. That's the key to success. Start as a generalist, become a specialist, get other specialists. That's it.
Thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time you take. Thank you very much, sir. And I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.